Right. I think we will go ahead and get started. Um, First, I'd like to thank you, Chief Brown, for joining us this morning. To give everyone who's watching an understanding of kind of how things will flow today, we are having this conversation live on Zoom. If you would like the Zoom link, feel free to message the Community Council on Facebook and we'll get you the Zoom link as we go. For those who prefer to just watch on the Facebook Live, if you have questions or comments or things you'd like us to ask, please feel free to leave them in the chat as we move forward, and then we'll be sure to ask those after the fact. The kind of program for today, this is the first in a series that we've started doing called Community Conversations. At our monthly Community Council meetings, it's too hard to dive into depth and kind of ask the kind of questions and have the conversations we want about any particular topic. So we decided to start this. Today will last 1 hour. All of our community conversations will be an hour. We've asked Chief Brown to just give a little bit of an overview of what's happening here in Glendale, the kind of status of the police department, and then we'll open it up to Q&A questions from the audience. I have some pre-prepared questions and then some of our officers do. So we'll get to those first just as a way of kicking off the Q&A. And then we'll turn it over to the public. But thank you again for your time this morning, Chief Brown, and we'll turn it over to you.
Turner, thank you. And Ashley, thank you very much. And you didn't tell me you had pre-prepared questions because you didn't share those with me. So
they're pretty basic.
That's okay. Hey, listen, it's a pleasure to be with you this morning. I know I appreciate everybody taking some time to talk about these things because they're important. They're important to all of us. They're important to me. They're important to our law enforcement officers. Detective Oliver, I think he told me he was going to be on. It's important to him. He is the new DCLO, and in the police world, we love acronyms, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But just a bit about me. I'm coming up on, in 2 months, I'll have been with the Salt Lake City Police Department for 30 years. I hail from a family in law enforcement. My father was a Salt Lake County deputy for 30 years. My brother was a Salt Lake County deputy for about 22 years. And so I didn't fall too far from the tree. I became, well, I will say I was a firefighter first. I was a firefighter for a couple of years, and then I saw the light and went and became a law enforcement officer. It's been a great career. I've never regretted one day of it. I was raised out in White City, that area, and I grew up. I went to Jordan for a couple of years, went to Alta the first year it opened. I have 3 boys. I didn't get married till I was later in life. I have 3 young boys, and so it's kind of where I'm at with my career. But I've been chief now since 2015, June, and I want you to know this is a great organization. The Salt Lake City Police Department, the women and men are 100% committed to the communities they serve. And I want you to know that they love and they serve Glendale with all their heart. So with that being said, 2020, what a year. That year was the longest 10 of my life. I never want to repeat that. It was difficult to say the least. COVID, who would have thought, right? And then sadly, just as we were dealing with COVID, we had earthquakes. And then sadly, the events that transpired on May 30th brought law enforcement center and focused on a lot of different things that happened across our country. May 30th, we all saw the things that transpired we saw the things that happened before that in Minneapolis. But on May 30th, we had what we thought was going to be a car caravan, which simply took a different turn, and we saw things happening in Salt Lake City that we've never seen before. The riotous behavior, the damage to our public safety building, a police car that was flipped over and burned, the looting, the rioting. On that day, our officers sustained a lot of injuries. I spoke to many of them after, and they were very concerned. They were actually fearful that this may be the way that their law enforcement career ended. 21 of them went to the hospital. So we suffered greatly on that day. But one thing that people don't realize in 2021, since May 30th in Salt Lake City, we had over 300 protests, some small, some large, other acts of civil unrest. But the Salt Lake City Police Department stepped up every day, the officers, to take care of those that wanted to come and express their First Amendment rights. They also had to deal with the, some of the riots and some of the assaults and the things that occurred. But we did that for almost 300 different events last year. It did take a toll. We have seen, just like across the country, a rise in violent crime and all crime. In Salt Lake City, we had our violent crime went up 21%. That's alarming. That's disturbing, and it doesn't sit well with me, the mayor, and I'm sure you as well. What that really means is that there were 287 more individuals that became victims of crime, and that's unacceptable. And so this year we stood, the mayor, myself, and some of our partners stood together and put forth a violent crime position and a task force, and we can talk more about that. But what happened last year is that we had some officers that, for some, you can't blame them. They've moved on to other organizations. Some left law enforcement, and so we've had more resignations and retirements than we've seen in years, and so that pulled people off the street. As we had to take care of those protests and the riots, that pulled people off the street. COVID, we weren't immune to COVID, although we practiced as best we could. We used the PPE, the gloves, the glasses, and the masks, but we did have some infections. We did have some quarantines, and that had an impact too. So it was kind of the perfect storm. A lot of officers were dealing with the civil unrest. A lot of officers chose different courses and directions in their lives. COVID played an impact, but it did take people off the street and out of your communities, and we did see violent crime rise. There are a lot of different moving parts to that in the criminal justice system. The jail was downsized. The courts came to a screeching halt, and a lot of things that used to work weren't working. So that's kind of an introduction. We can dive into any part of that turn that you'd like, but I want you to know that we're on a good trajectory. We've put officers back to patrol. We're starting a class of 26 on Monday. I'm going to go give a welcome to them. And I think a lot of the bad things that we've experienced are in the rearview mirror, I hope.
Well, thank you very much for that. The pre-prepared questions I have are both on the 2021 crime control plan. The first question, and I just want to start kind of by defining terms, but goal number 2 of the crime control plan was to increase clearance rates. And I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit at first about what is a clearance rate, and then kind of where we're at with those.
Sure, Turner. I knew you were going to get into the details, so good question. All right, so let's just say if you had a burglary or somebody stole a bike from your shed and you called and we responded, and it took us 2 or 3 hours, maybe longer, to get there. We took the report. The report went to the detectives. The detectives look into that to see if there are any viable things that they can follow up on, suspects, witnesses, maybe some Ring doorbell, video, anything that could help us solve that. But if we're so busy doing other things and we can't solve those crimes, we're just kind of going through the motions. We're just doing it over and over and over. We're not catching the perpetrator. We're not putting somebody in jail for the crimes they're committing. So when you solve a crime, you can, one of the clearances is solved by arrest or cleared by an arrest. And so that's what you want. If somebody's going to commit a crime, if they're going to break into your house, if they're going to assault you, you want to be able to clear that with an arrest. And so as we increase the clearance rates, there's a whole lot of things that are going into that. So if you put more officers back into the community, in which we did, we were down, let me see, in November, we were down 64 officers. And so we went through our department. We knew we were going to have some officers, 18, graduate out of FTO, and that's the field training program that we put them in, where they ride with another officer and they learn how to do the job. But they came out in November. But that wasn't the number we needed to fill up all the beats to be in your communities. And so we went through the organization and we said, well, we may have to take one detective from this position, or we reduce this squad by this much. Or so we've taken another 20 and put them forward into the community. So if you call, we will be there. There was a lot of conversation about rising response times. It was taking us longer to get there. Well, that's absolutely true. It was. Two things. You would think in a year of COVID, where everybody's staying home, that a lot of our calls for service would go down. That is not the case. We had over 16,000 more calls last year than we did the previous year. So for whatever reason, people were calling the police more, and we were finding ourselves going on a lot of suspicious calls. We would go and find somebody sitting in a church parking lot in a car, and we'd pull up and it would be, hey, I'm working from home. My kids are at home schooling. I just needed to get out for a break. So we were getting calls for all kinds of things, but kind of all the way around, Turner, to your question, we needed more people in the field. That will help us respond quicker and catch people. If we can catch people, we clear it by an arrest. We hold somebody accountable for that action. That's what we're talking about, clearance rates.
Thank you. My next question deals with objective number 3 in the crime control plan, and it talks about improving coordination and communications within the department and with external partners. Just wondering what kind of programs or kind of goals that have been set to improve that coordination and communications. And then I'd like to leave with a takeaway for folks that are watching. What is the kind of best way for them to continue to engage with the police department? Is it through the SLC mobile app? Kind of what things would be helpful for our neighbors to do to support crime control in the neighborhood?
All right. I'll go back to objective number 3, improve coordination and communication within the police department. Again, with COVID, we put a lot of detectives. The detectives, we learned that they could do their job from home, and so they were working from home. And as we moved people out to keep them safe, sometimes that disrupted the communication. I think we've all learned that although Zoom is nice because you can go to a meeting in 30 seconds, but there's kind of a human element that you miss. There's that talk around the water cooler a little bit that is kind of helpful. And so we found that there was a lack of communication up and down throughout the organization, and we've been striving to improve that forever. We do a CompStat model here in the police department where we look at the data, the intelligence that drives where we respond and put people, the operations that we conduct, the tactics that we use. And so we were finding that was difficult as well. And just the very fact that officers were just going call to call to call. Turner, when I took over a few years ago, I went and talked to the officers and I said, hey, what are we doing tonight? And they said, Chief, we're doing the STAR pattern. I said, what is the STAR pattern? I've done this job for a while. And they said, well, my beat's in Glendale, but I get a call over in Rose Park, so I go there. And then I get a call in Sugar House, and I go there. And I go up to the avenue. So they call it the STAR. They were going all over the city. And that's kind of what happened in the end of 2020 is we were down a lot of calls and officers were just going call to call to call. And so filling up the beats, putting officers, supporting the front end. I mean, patrol should always be the backbone of any organization, or especially this police organization. That's where we've got to be. And so giving them the intelligence, make sure they know what we're looking for, coordinating with, this operation's going here, or we're looking for this ring of individuals that are stealing cars. The better you can communicate up and down an organization, the better you'll be able to serve the community. And so that was the intent, not only internal, but to communicate through to our community, because I'm telling you, you guys are our best partner. The tips and the calls that you call us on, that you are our very best partner. So the better we can communicate in all aspects, that's what's driving objective number 3, Turner.
Thank you. I have just two more questions, and then we'll go ahead and turn it over to, I'll have Ashley go first, and then if anyone else on the call would like to ask a question, if you would just raise your hand using the hand raising feature, it'll help me just call on folks and keep things structured. My second to last question is, could you just share what Project Safe Neighborhoods is and how it interacts with a neighborhood like Glendale?
Okay, Project Safe Neighborhood. That is a program that's been it's kind of been part of the U.S. Attorney's Office for many, many years. And towards the end of 2020, I started talking with U.S. Attorney John Huber, and we had some conversations. What really worked up in Ogden was they defined 5 or 6 square blocks, and they called it the box. And if you got caught in that box and you met this criteria, they were going to go after you federally with federal charges. I felt like I didn't want a box. I wanted, because criminals, they don't care where they go. They'll be in Glendale, they'll go to Rose Park, they'll go everywhere. They'll go to, outside the city. But if you're within the boundaries of our city and you meet the criteria of a violent criminal that's having an impact in our community, we're going to go after you federally. One of the biggest problems with Turner, do you want me to go long answers or short answers? This is a 3-minute answer, or it could be quite a while. I don't want to.
Go ahead and take time. I think our goal is just to provide information to folks. So please feel free to
all right. If I'm rambling, somebody just raise their hand and says, "Shut up, Chief." So anyway, that's what we did. We stood, the mayor, myself, John Huber, the U.S. Marshal, Matt Harris, the Commissioner of Public Safety for the state. And what we did is we basically focused or refocused, because they've always been our partners, but we're going after those violent criminals in our community. There are studies that show, and these have been proven over time, that 5 to 8% of your criminals are responsible for 50% of your crime. But what we were finding is our officers were doing great work. They were arresting people. They were taking them to jail. Sadly, either through pretrial or because of COVID, the jail had shrunk its capacity from almost 3,000 to under 1,000. So they had to be very selective of who came in, who they would hold, who they would OR out. That OR means on their own recognizance. They would let them out with the promise that they would follow through in the criminal justice system and go to court. Well, guess what? Court's been mothballed for over a year now. Nobody goes to court. So we've got a lot of components of this criminal justice system that kind of have ground to a halt. Let me get a couple things here. We had, and this is the example I used in the press conference, we had an individual that we had arrested 9 times starting in April of last year. So over those 8 months, this individual was arrested 9 times. They were released from jail the very same day 5 times. They never stayed in jail for more than 5 days for any one of those arrests. And this was an individual that was committing felonies in our community. This was an individual that was a restricted person bearing a firearm, but yet the system, and I'm not pointing fingers at anybody, but the system continually let them out. That was a problem. I've got an email here from the bike sergeant. This is the very best bike sergeant well, Eldon, you know that you have a great bike squad, that Pioneer Bike Squad that serves both Rose Park and Glendale. That squad is awesome. But he basically sent me a text. This is the text. He said, this name's Sergeant Warner. He says, our biggest hurdle is the amount of time the jail is holding our APs, arrested persons. As an example, we booked 1 AP on multiple first-degree felony charges for selling drugs at Madison Park. She was back on 800 West North Temple within 3 hours of being booked. That's a first-degree felony. Booked into jail, out in 3 hours on North Temple. A parolee. So this is a person that's already been convicted, out on parole, who fled on foot, was charged with multiple felony 2s and released within 24 hours. Finally, a drug dealer on 800 West was arrested for distribution and had a loaded handgun in his waistband. He was released within 24 hours. I'm sure most, if not all, our felony arrests have the similar result. The squad will continue to do their job as they have all year, but the community should know that the jail and the courts are not doing their part in putting the brunt of the problem squarely back on the shoulders of the PD and the communities we serve. So that's coming from a sergeant that is doing the work. And I'm telling you, they haven't stopped doing the work, but it's very frustrating. So it's kind of this, what's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results without the ability to hold somebody accountable, especially to the community standards and expectations we have. It's disheartening. A lot of these individuals are officers known by first name. So that drove us to that federal prosecution, because once the U.S. attorney, if they meet the criteria, once they say we're going to charge them, it's a different game. They'll put a hold on them in jail, and they don't get out. I mean, the U.S. Marshals will put a hold, and if there's not room at the jail at Salt Lake County Jail, they'll find room either in Tooele or Cache County or Davis County. They'll find another jail for them to be. They're not released like they are in the system now. And then in the prosecution, if they're prosecuted and they're convicted, they'll go serve every day of their time in a federal penitentiary, and there are none in Utah. There's no getting out for good behavior. So the federal system does strike fear into the hearts of those that are really the want to commit violent crime in our communities. We had, and just to tell you where we're at, one of the things in that press conference, the mayor and I, we committed that we would report back to the community because we wanted to be part of this, was to be open and transparent. The Project Safe Neighborhood statistics right now, since we started in January, we have 31 individuals that defendants that have been charged. The charges, we had 18 charged with illegal firearm possessions, 10 for drug trafficking, 2 for robbery, 1 for other crimes. We've seized 31 guns, 10 of which were stolen, $71,000 in ill-gotten cash. So this is making an impact. These are the people that we don't want in our communities. And these are the people that are responsible for a lot of the crime, not just violent crime, but a lot of the crime. So that's kind of where we're at with the Project Safe Neighborhood. How it impacts into your communities is, I wanted to tell you, there were 2 examples. On January 19th, we had a male, he went to a house. It was I think it was his ex-girlfriend or some sort of individual that he had a partner with, and he pulled out an AK-47. Anybody know what an AK-47 is? That's a Russian assault rifle. And he proceeded to launch rounds into the community, standing there in the middle of the road. And then he jumped in the car, took off. I believe there were, we found some casings through good police work. We identified him. We haven't found the gun, but this individual is now in custody, has been charged in this federal system. He is a restricted individual with a gun and is looking at 6.5 years if convicted. Now they'll have their due rights in jail, but they're looking at 6.5 years in jail. We had another individual. This is a documented Norteños gang member. On one night, committed 3 drive-bys at 3 different locations in our community, shooting up houses, go to another one, shoot up another house, go to another one. Well, I think the last time we heard the shots and a pursuit was initiated. We chased him through the neighborhoods. They in the report, they told me they disabled the car. I'm not quite sure how they did that, but our cops are pretty resourceful, but that didn't stop this guy. He got out of the car, continued running. As he was running, he reached into his waistband, he threw a gun. We actually found and located the gun, but he darted into the community somewhere. He hid. We brought out our bloodhound Huck, and our bloodhound tracked him to apprehension. This again is another individual in our community that has committed, I don't know how many drive-bys, that has been a habitual problem, but now is looking at serious federal time for their crimes. So those are just 2, but I'm telling you, we now have 31 individuals charged under that. That's kind of the direction we're going.
Thank you. I'm going to ask my last question, and it deals with, so one of the objectives is to make sure that eligible calls are being moved to the online reporting system so that I don't want to say less important calls, but calls that are eligible to be handled online can go through that system to reduce the amount of calls to 911. I'm wondering what type of calls are eligible to be reported online, and kind of what does that process look like?
Well, a lot of times, I mean, property crimes where they're not occurring right now. Don't ever just say, hey, this guy's breaking in my house, I'm going online. Don't do that. Call us. It's 911 if it's an emergency, 799-3000 if it's not. But I think we have telephonic officers that are working quite a bit, and if the call is an investigation type, they can help you. They can help you take the report, because I mean, I know my mom and dad got their car stolen one time, and my dad was a Salt Lake County sheriff, and I said, Dad, why didn't? I mean, if they had to go online and fill it out, they don't even have the internet. So we will help you. If you need us, we'll come. If you need some help walking through the program, we can do that too. But there is an online reporting program where you can go on and you can fill out the information. It's very intuitive. You can walk through it and it'll ask you the questions. It'll allow you to download pictures. It'll allow you to put in video. And if you need to, we'll follow up there. But Eldon, I see on the line, you've probably done more of this recently than I have. Can you give us some topics of crimes that they can report there?
Sure. Like you said, any property crime where there's not someone on property or anything that's occurring that could be a danger to someone. Somebody that's tagged your fence, someone that's maybe stolen your bike that you don't have any information on. Those are probably the biggest ones of the property crimes that get reported on the internet. Now, don't report a stolen car or anything on the internet, because that's a little bit different. But if you have a bike or a scooter or something that's stolen that you don't have any information about, then yeah, we can report those online.
Thank you. I'm going to transition over. Ashley, we'll have you go next. And just really quickly, for those that have joined the Zoom late or who are just joining on Facebook, if you have questions and would like to ask them and you're on here on Zoom, if you would just use the hand raising feature or even privately message me, I'll just call on folks. We'll start with Ashley. And then if you're on Facebook and you have questions, please leave them in the chat and either I can ask them or we can get you the Zoom link to join us and ask them live. But Ashley, why don't you start with your questions?
Yeah, so I'm just kind of concerned about with Glendale when it comes to, we see more statistics coming out that shows kind of the negative sides of just patrolling strictly neighborhoods of, people of color, minorities, or low-income neighborhoods, and how that can be kind of damaging. It can turn into some other situations. And I just wanted to know if the department had any, if there was any talk or any kind of plans to talk about the demographics of like our neighborhood, other West Side neighborhoods, and if they're taking that into account and how when it comes to patrolling.
Ashley, great question. Great question. Yes. One of the things that has come about in this police reform, so you speak, what we call it. Here's the thing, and I have to tell younger officers, because they come in and they say, hey, what's happening? Our whole world's changing. I said, don't sweat it. The most consistent thing about policing is it always changes. I mean, that's it. But what the two things that police officers hate the most is the way things are and change. They just, it's like, but in my career, I look back at the Rodney King riots, policing changed. We look back at the Nicole Brown and O.J. Simpson, domestic violence changes. 911 changed things. Mike Brown, Ferguson, that changed things, and here we are now. But yes, we're looking at recruiting more of a diverse workforce. And people say, well, Chief, how are you going to do that? And actually, I'll tell you, we just hired a class. We were going to try to hire 30, and 26 will start on Monday. But of that 26, 10 are from diverse backgrounds. 10 are of, not all, there are females, there are officers of color. That's 30% of the class that we've hired. That's a huge number. to increase the demographic or the diversity of our police department. And I asked, I said, what, why now? Why do you want to be part of this whole policing, as difficult it is right now? And they said, well, I can do two things. I can sit at home, I can watch the news, I can yell at the TV, or I can get off my butt and I can go down and change things that I want to. And so we're going to continue, Ashley, but I'm telling you, the communities of Salt Lake are stepping up. The people from our communities, your communities, we have an Explorer program within the police department where we have youth, and it starts at age 14 to 21. And they come for those 7 years and they can be a part of us. They meet with us, they do all kinds of activities. It's really drives, it's driven by they want to be police officers at some point. It's the most diverse. I think we have about 50 Explorers. It is the most diverse unit within the police department by far. Majority is female. I don't have the stats. I should have brought them, and I'm sorry, but it's the most diverse. And now this class that we just hired, 3 of which are our own homegrown Explorers from our communities that are joining our ranks. And so we're seeing it, and it's in our plan, and it's our goal because we want our police department to represent everybody's communities.
And can I also ask if there's any talk on incorporating more social workers into the police force, just from the case that we had in Glendale where there was a mental health crisis and he was killed in Glendale, and that was very concerning for a lot of people in my neighborhood. And then that did spark up the discussion again, why not send out social workers and that whole political talk. And I wanted to know if you guys were talking any more about incorporating that or what your ideas were with that.
Yeah. Again, another great question. We started we call it the CCC. It's the Community Connection Center, but that's where our social workers partner with our CIT officers, those that run the program. And we call it the co-responder model. And it's been a huge success. Everybody's talking about doing it now. I'm telling you, Salt Lake City, we've been doing it for 3 years now. This program is very forward-leaning and progressive, and we are on the DOJ list for best practices. Agencies fly into Salt Lake City to see how we do it. But to answer your question, we're looking at expanding that. I do have some stats of those social workers. Last year, the social workers in this co-responder model, so you have a social worker and a police officer go out together. They made 1,646 contacts. They deployed the teams 167 times. They took 352 patrol calls. So when they're working, they'll hear a call, they'll jump that call and go take it. They were called to help officers 103 different times. So officers will get on a call and say, hey, I just don't know how to fix this problem. And so they'll call the team out. They did outreach 204 times. They were able to, this is kind of on the other end, they were able to help people with transportation needs 16 times. They were able to help individuals with housing needs 397 times. Into substance abuse or treatment 101 times. Mental health issues and help with that 253. So this team, I mean, seriously, that's really the future. What it does is it allows us to respond not only in the crisis that's occurring, but also after the crisis, after things have calmed down, we can provide that casework, and really, rather than just keep going back to the problem, we can help somebody get whatever resources they need so we don't have to continually deal with that problem or issue. So I would, in the Racial Equity Police Commission hearings, that's one of the big things that comes up, and they would love to see us expand that model. So but you're spot on. That's Salt Lake City is doing exactly what we should. We'd love to do more. I guess, Ashley, that's kind of what you're saying. You'd like to see more of that?
Yeah, and I'm just also wondering at what point is there the deciding factor of if a social worker should go out, since the one in Glendale, a social worker wasn't called, the mom called the cops on her own son, which that's also a communication issue within our community, that they don't know that there's different ways of handling situations. But a social worker never came, and it ended bloody, it ended bad. There have been I think there were multiple calls before about the same person with a mental health crisis. And is it up to the cops on the scene to decide whether they need a social worker? Is it up to the person calling 911 to ask for a social worker? And is there any like consequences if it's not followed through or anything like that?
That's the huge talk that's going on right now, but not to talk about that case because it's in litigation and I don't want to really focus on that. But I would love to have Turner and Ashley. This might be a discussion we can build out, but I'd love to have Jessica Waters come and talk to this group about what we're doing in that world. Jessica's the director over our social workers. And I asked her point blank, I said, Jessica, in the co-responding models that we use, would you and your social workers go out without your police partners? And she said, no. She said, no. We feel very much, we're a lot safer when we're together and we're more effective. Now, there are different types of calls though, Ashley. If somebody's just feeling depressed and they're laying on their bed and they don't want to go to work, I mean, we could send a social worker to those type of calls all day long. But if somebody's in crisis when they're calling the police, I love that co-responder model because you get the safety and protection of a police officer, but you get the outreach and the softer side with the social worker. And that's what's proven to be so very beneficial and productive for Salt Lake City. We can get people through the crisis and then we can help them past that. So, but MCOT's looking at a different model. There's a lot of different models and different levels of calls.
Yeah, so I agree that, you know, it is beneficial to have a police officer there. Things can get violent, all that. But when is it the responsibility of the police officer to make the deciding factor if a social worker needs to come? Who's deciding then? How are they getting out there? And that's just more what I want to know.
Yeah, well, you got to remember there's only 10 of them and they work like 8 to 6, Monday through Friday. If I had 20, we could expand it into the afternoons. If we had more, we could put it into the weekend. So
is there plans on expanding it at all or getting more funding?
I think it's the future of law enforcement. I really do. I think you're going to see, I don't know, well, police work is social work. It really is. But I think you're going to see different models and different, I think you're going to see it someday. You'll see social workers riding in a car, and that's how you respond to a lot of calls. And so, because I mean, people usually don't call us on their birthday or their best days. They're calling us in crisis, and a lot of crisis is driven by mental health. If you follow the numbers in the 60s, the population of the country was 150 million. And we had over 500,000 mental health beds in this country. Roll it forward to today, the population of this country is 320 million. And we have less than 50,000 mental health beds in this country. So where did everybody go? Well, many of them are on the street, and that's who we're dealing with every day. We've got to refocus. We've got to kind of shift our paradigm and think, how do we help that rather than trying to arrest it? And that's really the focus of what I would love to see, is rather than take somebody to jail. Well, if you're going to commit violent crimes, I think you should go to jail. If a lot of the crimes that are happening are because of mental health issues and things like that, let's not arrest it. Let's not incarcerate it. Let's fix it. Let's help you. So
one more thing before I'll turn it over to more other members of the community. I talked to Detective Oliver about this and he said needs to go higher up. So here you are. I wanted to know if we could maybe look into having something online, something to monitor kind of where the Glendale Police Spike Squad is, maybe, because I know they have to deal with a lot of calls at North Temple, but we're not seeing them too often in Glendale. We're told they're in Glendale, never seen it. If there was any way to kind of make something to be able to track, not exactly where they all are at all times, but the frequency of which they're on the trail and stuff like that.
We want to put GPS trackers on them and we can see them going all over the.
No, not necessarily that. That wouldn't, I don't think that would work out too well, but just something to be able to kind of track when they're in our community, when they're actively, you know, patrolling the trails.
Well, I'll tell you what, I get every week, I get a bike log from these officers. They send me a log. This is their log from last week. And they basically tell me, well, they're on 11th South and Navajo on a shots fired. Oh, that's the gang. I get one from the gang detectives, and they want to start looking at these because this really shows the work that they're doing in your communities. And it's awesome. I'm telling you, the things that they're doing are unbelievable. So we'll have to scrub out some of the information, but we can talk about the good arrests and things that they're doing in your community, and you could see that. Eldon, do you want to maybe look at that? You want to?
Absolutely. I talked to Captain Beener about that, and we'll get some more of those statistics, and I can give those to you every month, Ashley, during the CC meetings.
Yeah, look, okay, so here's the bike one. I get one every week. So Sean Warner sends it out, but this is his email, 3 pages of work they're doing, addresses, arrests they've made. And at the very back, they show kind of what their yearly totals. So far, they've made 44 felony arrests. They've seized 3 firearms. They put stolen cars, the money, heroin, meth, crack, and other things. So it's all done. We could just Elton just has to do more work now. So that's okay.
That's great, Chief. I'll do that. I'll start reporting on that every month too, Ashley.
Thanks. Attorney, you can send it over to anyone else.
Okay, Cody, I'm going to go over to you because you had some questions. And then after Cody, I'm going to let Diane go. So if you guys just want to go in that order.
Hi, thanks for being here, Chief. I had a question about homelessness, and just since it's been pushed over more into the west side, into our neighborhoods, I was curious what you thought the police's role was in combating that and kind of controlling that situation, because it seems to be drawing a lot of resources away, since you already seem to be spread pretty thin.
Yeah, homelessness is a tough situation, and really, when you look at homelessness is not a crime, but the underlying factors are usually there's mental health issues, there's addiction issues, and things like that. So, with that co-responder model that we were talking about, that Ashley was asking me about, they do a lot of work on some of these encampments. They spend a lot of time out there trying to help people into services, whatever it might be, housing, treatment, whatever we can provide them. The city has a program, Mayor Mendenhall has a program called the CCP, the Community Connection Program. And it brings stakeholders together. It brings the county health department, it brings the police, it brings the internal hand and CAN and some of the different agencies within the police department or within the city to see what we can do to help. It brings VOA, it brings a lot of nonprofits to go out and do this outreach. And so it's a good program, and we identify areas that really need help, and we go out and we provide that outreach. But at some point, some of these encampments are really a health and safety issue for the communities, and a health and safety issue for those that live there. I mean, I don't know if you've ever been in an encampment or near one there. Some of the conditions are deplorable. They're horrible. And so they do the outreach. They actually bring in the courts to see if they can clear up some of the misdemeanor warrants and the smaller crimes, so that, because if you have a crime or a warrant on your history, you can't get housing. So Judge Landau through the courts and Judge Robinson do great work to go out and hold those in abeyance, clear those up so we get them into housing, whatever we can do. So there's a lot of outreach. And then at some point after we've closed the camp and given everybody notification, the health department will come in and clear up the debris. So we try to focus on the areas that are, the worst, and where we can do that outreach. But yeah, the staffing is unbelievable, and the cost is immense. So did that answer your question, Cody? I'm sorry, you may have.
Yeah. And then I guess I had one short question. I was wondering, I'm a case manager. I work with the chronically homeless, and I was wondering, is there any type of program of that has social workers volunteer to or a organization that would train social workers or something, so there could be mental health advocate in a position working with the police, I guess, as a outside organization?
Wow, that's a good idea, Cody. I mean, okay, so let me make sure I've got this because, all right, because we have neighborhood watch, we have citizen patrol, things like that. Are you saying mental health workers that come and work with the police department, get a little bit of training and then volunteer their time and services to help in some of these things? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, I just know like me as a Glendale resident would be interested in just in my head, I'm just like, hey, I'm sitting home a lot. And if there was a contact that the police could like, hey, we're having an issue, you know, can you stop by with us when we respond to this or something? I just know a lot of my coworkers would be interested in something like that. And I know I've talked to residents that aren't social workers that would want to do something like that, but they don't have training. And I don't.
Eldon, make a note of that. That's actually a really good idea, Cody. That's thinking outside the box there. That's pretty good.
Chief, does MCOT do some of that training?
They might. We anyway, make a note of that. We'll give it to Jessica and see what we can do. That's not a bad idea at all.
Nope.
You do know that social workers are in hot demand right now. They're really hard to find. Seriously, that's a hot commodity. So we're lucky that we've been able to keep our 10, and we're lucky for the work they do. They're awesome. They're worth their weight in gold.
Yeah, cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
Diane, we'll move over to your question.
Okay, I have a question about what's being done to help the officers and their mental health, because I think the things that they see every day sometimes makes them jaded. Sometimes I'm sure they don't realize even how mentally they're affected by these things. And then I've heard also that they're afraid to report their problems because they're afraid they'll get labeled as I don't know, whatever, needing help that they probably shouldn't be needing or something. But I mean, I had a friend who's an officer, who's been an officer, I believe he's just recently retired with Salt Lake City Police Force. And we, in a casual evening conversation, were sitting around and he made a comment that angered me so much because he said, and I can understand his frustration, but he made a comment that if his canine officer was suffering from a drug overdose and a person that was ODing on drugs, he would give the shot of naloxone to his canine. And, you know, whether he knows it or that at the time, I believe he needed some sort of counseling, mental health, you know, something. So they see too much every day to not be affected by the things they're seeing. So what's being done for their mental health?
All right, Diane.
Therefore, our community's health.
I know. Okay, who prepped this group, Turner? They got all the hard part. No, Diane, I'm glad you asked that, seriously. Okay, let me kind of I'll go back and give you the history lesson just real quick. You're right. Cops, you never want to expose your Achilles heel because then you'll be labeled or like, oh, you've got a problem. So we basically for years have just kept it, internalized it. You don't want to talk about it because you're the guy now with the problem, or you're the woman with the problem. Well, the military really has shown us there's a better way. When our troops are deployed in this, they see the things, you know, the horrific tragedies and effects of war. PTSD, it's real. And the military has really kind of forced that issue and said, look, we need to talk about it. We need to get people to help. And most importantly, soldiers and officers need to step up and get the help they need. So we've been talking about it now. If you do a 20-year law enforcement career, you see probably just as much or more than people would see in war. I mean, the tragedy, I mean, the little kids that are hurt, or, I mean, it's just, I don't want to get into it, but you see a lot. And then you internalize it and you go home and you put it in that little box and you don't talk about it because you don't want it to be part of your home, you know. But we just, following everything that occurred through the summer of last year, we brought on a full-time mental health clinician for the department. And she's wonderful. Officers can make an appointment with her and go talk with her. I wanted to be the very first because I'll be honest, last year was rough, and I wanted the officers to know that it's okay to talk to somebody. So I went and talked to her, and we had some great conversations, but since that time, it kind of started slow because cops are kind of like you say, they're a little wary, like we don't know that person, but once they build that bond, their trust forms, and then she's really busy right now. And so we actually have, so that is something we'd like to expand upon. Maybe we need one or two. We also have a peer support team within the department made up of officers that have been trained to provide that type of help and counseling, and really to help people recognize there might be a problem, not to provide the counseling, but get people to the professionals that can help them. We have an Eap program where they can get involved with some visits for family counseling or individual counseling. So we're throwing the net as wide as we can, and try to provide them the help we can. It's a big topic right now. So we're looking at expanding the mental health component of that right now. But you're right, Diane, they're tough career, and it affects us. So.
Is there a way to, and maybe you're doing this, address the group of officers? So rather than having them come to you individually or going for help individually, somehow can be bring awareness to them that maybe they do need that help, whereas, you know, they might not be conscious that they even need help.
Yeah, we do a couple things. Peer support is really officers. A lot of the people that are on peer support have been through it before, and they know the signs. And they know that if they start seeing somebody they've known for many years start acting a little bit different, that they can say, hey, is everything okay? You doing okay? And see if we can't get them into some sort of help. I think that's a big part of it. But a lot of times when we have situations, bad calls, we will do a group debrief and talk to them, because we'll bring in the mental health professionals and we'll get together and talk about what they've seen, what they've experienced, how it's affecting them. And that'll help perpetuate the conversations that need to be had to get them the help they need. But I've had officers, come in and tell me with tears in their eyes, I didn't care anymore. I didn't care about my family. I didn't care about my kids. I didn't care about anything. And he said, I needed to get that help, and it changed my life. So.
And then I just wanted to thank you for all you officers do for us to help keep our community safe, and for seeing those horrible things and taking care of them for us.
Yeah, thank you, Diane. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Diane. I saw a couple of other folks join, Josh, DB, Carrie, Kelly. Do any of you have questions? Just want to give you the opportunity. Charlotte, I see you joined later too. Any of you have questions? Kelly, did you want to go? Is that what your thumbs up was?
Hey, Turner, just real quick, there's a lot of things in the chat. I haven't been able to look at them at all. So if Eldon, are you looking at them? Are there questions we can follow up there?
Yeah, I'm looking at them. I've answered some, and I'll
Okay.
get some answers to some more.
All right, thanks. All right, Josh.
Hi, good morning, Chief. I just wanted to reiterate, of the 31 individuals since January, this is for the statistics for the Project Safe Neighborhood.
Uh-huh.
You said there was 31 individuals of January. Can you repeat what those 18, 10, and 2 were for?
Okay,
the
so
crimes that those were for? And
there are
that
31.
was that throughout the city?
Yeah,
Is that throughout the city, or is that just in Glendale?
No, that's throughout the city, Josh. Yeah.
Okay.
That's 31 defendants have been charged. The charges, so some of them may have more than one charge. There were 18 charges for illegal firearm possessions. There were 10 charges of drug trafficking. There were 2 charges of robbery, and then there's a 1 for other crimes. So the numbers won't probably add up to 31.
Okay, that's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? DB, do you just want to ask it verbally instead of in the chat?
Sure, I can ask it verbally. One of those unshowered mornings, though, so that's why there's no video. But basically, you know, I've thought for a long time that neighborhoods aren't safe, and that's based on personal experience of break-ins. And hold on, let me open my laptop, and then the mic will get a little louder for you, I think.
Yeah.
So based on personal experience, it seems that my neighborhood isn't the safest, you know, and that's from break-ins, multiple break-ins, and I pulled a 9mm slug out of my sprinkler pipe because which means someone was shooting a gun in my backyard, you know,
Yeah.
and happened to hit the sprinkler, but it's a little scary. Other things too, you know, threatened on the trail, on the Parkway Trail. But what can I do personally to help the force get more resources and more officers? I know there's been a push for that, but these are politically heightened times as well. What pressure point, who can I petition to help you guys?
Well, I think you guys, your council member is Andrew Johnston, right?
Yes.
Andrew is a great supporter of law enforcement. Andrew's, by trade, he's a social worker. He understands kind of all the many of the things that we're dealing with. So I think if you would let him know of your support, that would be great. And then because the council really funds our department and helps us, you know, with the programs and the CCC and everything else. So if you'll just let him know of your concerns and issues and the things that you want, that'd be awesome. The other thing is, don't ever stop calling. When people stop calling, we've got a problem. You may not feel like we get there quick enough, but or it does no good. What I find a lot of times is everybody thinks that the other neighbor is called and nobody calls. Every time you call, it puts a dot on the map. And when there's a dot on the map, we look at it in CompStat. And the bigger the dots get, the bigger cluster of dots get, we put more resources. So make those calls, whether it's 911 if it's an emergency or 799-3000. You're not wasting your breath. We'll come, but it gives us an idea of where we need to deploy through our intel-led policing. And then if there's ever, and Eldon can help us do that, but as COVID starts to lift a little bit and we can get out and about, we can set up either a neighborhood watch, which is really nice because you can identify yourself as a street or a neighborhood that is very aligned in reporting crime and watching out for each other. We have signs and things like that. That doesn't hurt. I mean, I call it what is the Bewitched? Who was the Kravitz? What was her name? The little lady across the street.
Agnes Kravitz,
yeah. Yeah. She was always calling and looking. That's not a bad thing either. You know, have your neighbors back. Call if you need to, or let them know. So, but there's a lot of different things. But first, thanks for your support. Let your council members know about it. Don't stop calling us, and then we can expand upon community policing. And Eldon's a great conduit for that.
One follow-up then. How many officers do you think you'd need to add to get to where you need to be, and what would that cost?
We just did a study, DB, it was an IACP study, and the number I think we were looking at was around 240 something in patrol. And that's what we did is over the years, and this kind of goes back to what Ashley was talking about, we sometimes we specialized ourselves right out of patrol. We made a gang unit, we made a vice unit, we made all these different special units. Well, guess what? There was nobody in patrol to go take the call. So we've kind of shifted back. And I think patrol, it was around 240 officers in patrol. And right now we're hovering right around 200. And that's why we had to do that reallocation of people back to patrol, because we've got to be in the community. So if you'll allow me, I'll get Eldon some numbers and he can come back and talk to you about that. Or I'd be glad to come back and talk with you guys again. You guys are very cordial and nice. Didn't beat me up too bad.
Thank you.
Kelly, do you want to just ask your question verbally?
I think her question was she wants another Eldon, right?
Can we have
There
we go. I want another Eldon and I want another Nate. Between the two of them, they've got 5 districts. That's a little bit too much.
Yeah.
I know Nate's running around like a chicken with his, well, I won't say he's running around like a chicken with his head cut off because he totally knows what he's doing and he's amazing. But 3 districts for him and 2 for, Rose Park and Glendale, that is a lot.
Yeah. And the idea was that, well, Eldon can explain it to you. We had, the way it was set up before, all of our CIU officers reported to a captain over in Liberty on the east, which was responsible for the east side of town. And I remember sitting in a meeting with Eldon, wondering where the captain was for the west side of for Pioneer. And he didn't even know about the problem or issue. And I was like, God, that's just not right. So this, and I committed to Councilmember Rogers, and I committed to the council that this is a start. And they were going to bring a command staff team with them. So Eldon can bring the sergeant over bikes. He can bring, he's got a lieutenant, he's got a captain, he's got a deputy chief. This was a team effort, but I know they're busy. So we may need to look at getting more, we call them DCLO, Division Community Liaison Officers assigned. So it's on our radar. And Eldon, you'll let me know how you're doing, but I agree, he's doing great work. I'd take 2 or 3 more of Eldon.
Well, we can just clone them all. It'll be great.
Okay.
Well, I promised you an hour, so we're going to go ahead and start wrapping up. I wanted to let those that are watching know we're going to continue to do this type of conversation where we can get a little bit more in the weeds and have a little bit more of an open conversation. Doing it at our community council meetings, there's just not enough time to really get into topics. And I want to thank the chief for your time. Thank you for doing this on a Saturday with us so that folks can participate. Future topics that have already been identified. Detective Oliver has talked about having, I forget the gang sergeant's name, I apologize, but having our local gang sergeant come to our next community council meeting. And I think we would like to schedule probably one of these conversations at length about the topic of gangs in the neighborhood. And then the other one that has come up multiple times is just understanding how the system for responding to unsheltered folks works in Salt Lake City. So we're working with Councilmember Johnston's office has helped connect us with the right folks. So that'll be another conversation that we will be having as we move forward, in addition to other ones. But if you have topics or ideas or things you'd like us to cover in this type of meeting, please let me know. But thank you so much, Chief. We really appreciate your time this morning.
Thank you, Turner. Thank you, everybody. It was a pleasure to be here. And like I say, if you ever want to have me back, just you know how to get a hold of me. And if you want, Turner, do you have my cell number?
I believe I do. If not, I can follow up and get it.
And share it with the group. I promise you, people call and I do answer my phone. So.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for coming this morning. We're going to go ahead and end the live stream.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks, Turner.
Bye.